speaker is a citizen of the earth, but he comes from Cairo in Egypt, of course. But he's never been to the pyramids. Yeah? So imagine coming from Cairo and never going to the pyramids. That's like coming from Australia and never going to New Zealand, I suppose. However, he grew up in this imposing culture, but he became an apothecary. I had to practice saying that. An apothecary. He became a neuroscientist. And he wants to tell you about the fact that we have a lot more false and distorted memories, than we can possibly imagine. And, you know, if they're not banal, then they can actually be quite, in his words, maleficent. That was another word I had to practice. So, to talk to us about these false memories that we all have and that impact our lives in ways we cannot imagine, please welcome to the stage with To is Human Memory, Ossama Khalif. Welcome.
Imagine with me the following scenario. You've decided to rob a bank. And while asking the banker to fill your bags with the money, you suddenly realize that your robbing mask is still around your neck. That's quite embarrassing, right? So you quickly pull it over your face, and then you look for your gun to discover that you, forgot it with your accomplice who's waiting for you outside in the car. At that point, that's an utter failure. This is not a joke. It happened in real life in Auckland, New Zealand. It was referred to as the most amusing robbery ever, where the people and the banker were giggling, giving the robber the money, who, by the way, got arrested 2 hours later with his accomplice after fleeing with the money. This is only one example out of many examples of brain or memory errors. What happened to our incompetent robber here is called absent-mindedness, where you simply forget what you initially planned for. And these memory errors are plenty. But sometimes forgetting to remember is by far better than recalling a memory that never happened. Allow me to explain. In 1975, Melbourne, Australia, a lady got raped, but she gave a vivid description of the perpetrator to the police, leading them to his door. When they arrested the guy, he had a bulletproof alibi. It turned out that this guy is the psychology professor, Donald Thompson, and at the same exact time when the crime took place, he was on live TV, being interviewed by a police commissioner discussing memory distortions. So what really happened, while she was watching this show, the real rapist broke into her place and did what he did, and she mistakenly developed a false memory. So now, if you think that developing a false memory is something infrequent in nature or exclusive to people with memory impairment, maybe you should think again of how many times you were dead sure of switching off the lights or the TV at your place, and then when you return back, you find that they are still on. Research has shown that there is no correlation whatsoever between our degree of certainty about a specific memory and this memory being true. So the bottom line here is we all do create false memories on a daily basis, mostly about trivial things. But if in a courtroom and your own life is on the line because of one of them, then we have to pay more attention to this matter. In the States, there are around 300 people who were convicted based on a false memory of a witness. And after spending up to 30 years behind bars, they were proven innocent by DNA testing. That's quite alarming, and that's why a lot of memory researchers are dedicating their efforts to study false memories in the lab. But before I tell you how they do so, let me maybe do a simple exercise with you. I'll read out loud 2 word lists, and then we ask you a couple of questions afterwards. The first word list: candy, sour, sugar, bitter, good, taste, tooth, nice, honey, soda, chocolate, heart, cake, tart, pie. The second word list: mad, wrath, fear, hate, fight, rage, hatred, temper, mean, fury, ire, emotion, enrage. So now please raise your hand if you remember that the word sweet was on the first word list. Keep your hands up, please. Now raise your other hand if you remember that the word anger was on the second word list. Great, that's the majority of you, and this is exactly how they induce a false memory in the lab, because neither of these words was on either of these lists. So in the lab, after the volunteers take the very same exercise like you did, they go inside a big brain scanner. This brain scanner can precisely measure the brain activation. And it turns out that the brain region responsible for hearing shows a very low activation upon the recall of a false memory, like the word sweet, which was not on the list and they never heard, when compared to the activation due to a true memory recall, like the word nice, which was on the list and they indeed heard. So my take-home message here is, by further developing this approach, it's quite possible to have a memory accuracy detector that can filter memories, true from phony. And since not all cases have evidence that's useful for DNA testing, this approach could definitely save lots of innocent lives in the courtroom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's two words come to mind, and they're not sweet or angry. The two words that come to my mind are fascinating and scary. Yeah? Can you tell us a bit more about how having these false and distorted memories can actually damage us? Is that... I mean, is it just because of our life and how we proceed in our life, given those false memories? It's the impact that that has?
So we cannot prevent ourselves from having our memories distorted, but just we need to be aware that we don't trust them 100%. So sometimes, every single time you recall a specific memory, you are changing it a little bit before restoring it. And then it becomes completely different from what happened in real life. And there are several reasons for this happening. Like, for example, the influence of the media on something that we already experienced. Sometimes we cannot distinguish what we really experienced through our own eyes or what we heard from the media, from our colleagues, or from the outer world in itself. So a lot of our memories are biased because of the influence of the outer world.
So they're really seen through the filters of culture and media and stories and stuff. That's amazing. Now, I heard a little birdie told me that you won a science slam recently. Is that right?
No, actually, recently I was competing in the European finals for Science Slam, but I didn't win it.
Oh, you didn't. But you won something recently, right? How did you get to the How did you get to the Europeans if you didn't?
So
isn't it like you got to kind of go do?
Yeah, they take the winners of Science Slams from different European countries, and then they compete in the finals for the European.
So you must have
I
won.
was representing Finland, so I won the one in Finland.
You won the Finnish one. Well, there you go. How about that? And I have got one more question. I mean, that's amazing. We should give him a clap for that. And I do have one more question for you, because when you wrote your application for this, you talked about jumping out of aeroplanes. Tell us about your whole jumping out of aeroplanes and why that was particularly odd. Come to the center of the stage.
So what happened is that back in the day, I used to practice parachuting. So I was jumping out of planes. And I clearly remember that the first time I ever experienced landing was the fourth time that I ever come on a plane. So the first 3 times I jumped out of the plane and I never experienced landing. And then the 4th time when I was traveling, so I experienced this landing, and I was really happy, and I was asking the stewardess, really? We are going to land, you know?
Yeah. So you'd only ever gotten used to jumping out, actually. That's such a fabulous story. Well, look, thank you so much for your amazing work. Really. Thank you so much. Really amazing.